Welcome to the Audio Architect Logic Rules Overview. In this video, we'll look at how we can trigger a predefined activation event according to when a specific condition occurs. Audio Architect possesses the capability to recall a panel, device, or venue preset, log a user-defined message event, and play an audio file according to a specified condition being met in a HiQNet device. Essentially, it allows us to define that if a parameter value is this, then trigger that event. For those familiar with SoundWeb London Logic, this is not the same feature set. Let's take a moment to look at how the two compare. When it comes time to configuring logic for devices, the Audio Architect Logic Rules allows us to trigger events based on reading parameter values from any HiQNet device, while SoundWeb London Logic is limited to BSS SoundWeb London devices. However, parameters from some Crown and JBL devices can also be read. A BSS device can also monitor the network presence of all HiQNet devices. Both types of logic are created using Audio Architect. However, logic rules can be created offline or online, while SoundWeb London logic must be configured offline due to the nature of the device having to recompile the new code. Logic rules in Audio Architect are fairly simple. While we can essentially read any parameter value within a venue file, we cannot create very complex rules. As we'll see shortly, the Logic Rules tool uses a step-by-step wizard for configuration. SoundWeb London Logic utilizes logic block objects similar in appearance to the audio processing objects found in the Configure Audio section. There are a number of ways to read in parameter values in addition to setting up logic processing and logic gates, allowing the programmer to create simple logic circuits or very complex ones. We'll explore some of those in another video. As already mentioned, logic rules can trigger events such as recalling a device, panel, or venue preset in addition to playing an audio file. Please note that alike to the Audio Architect scheduler, audio files are played out of the computer's sound card. SoundWeb London Logic can be utilized to recall parameter presets or can provide control of third-party devices through an IP or serial connection, as well as a logic output connection using the general purpose outputs of the device. Finally, events are triggered in two different ways. In addition to a parameter meeting a certain condition, logic rules require a PC running the Audio Architect venue file, while SoundWeb London Logic runs directly on the device's CPU and does not require a PC to exist on the network. As we can see, the two types of logic have key advantages over one another, and what we decide to use can be dependent upon the needs of the application. Before we move on to creating a logic rule, let's first set up a scenario. In our Audio Architect venue, we have a BSS SoundWeb London DSP processing the audio for two zones and a Crown DCI networked amplifier. Let's create a logic rule so that if the channel 1 amplifier output enable is turned off, thus putting the amplifier output into standby, then let's recall a panel preset to turn down the volume 1 for zone 1 to a predetermined level. This way, when the amplifier output enable is turned on, therefore taking the amplifier out of standby, audio levels will be at a lower level to start off with rather than whatever they were at during the time the amplifier was placed into standby. In today's demonstration, we are already online with the venue. Remember, logic rules can be created offline or online. We have also created a custom panel that contains only the Zone 1 gain parameter and have created a single panel preset to set the gain parameter value to -20 dB. We'll start off by clicking on the Logic Rules Tools option. From the Logic Rules wizard, we'll then click on the New Rule button. Next, we'll provide a descriptive name. Let's name this Zone 1 Amped Standby Volume Decrease. The parameter information field is where we select which parameter is monitored for a state change, or in other words, this is where we'll select to monitor if the amplifier output enable is off or on. Click on Add, and from the parameter readdress editor, we'll first select the amplifier in the device list. From the object list, we'll locate the channel 1 amp output, and from the parameter list, we'll locate the enable option. After making those selections, we can then click on Add and finally OK. From the Rule Wizard, we'll then click on Next to set up the condition selection. For today's demonstration, we'll use the operator selection of equals, considering we are working with a binary parameter. If we were working with a continuous parameter such as a fader, then we may opt for lesser, greater, lesser or equal, or greater or equal to. Next, for the condition threshold, we are going to set this to 0 since we are wanting to monitor when the amplifier output enable is turned off. For the condition reset, we'll leave this at manual. When the condition is met, that is when the parameter value is equal to 0, then Audio Architect will provide us with a notification indicating logic has been executed. In some logic rules, an automatic reset may be desired. This option allows us to recall a preset based on when the parameter changes from true to false when compared to the condition threshold. So in our case, if we wanted to trigger an event based on the amp output enable reverting back to equaling 1, then we could choose this, but we'll leave it set to manual considering we want the fader to remain at a lower level when the amp standby is turned on again. Click on Next, and here we'll define what action is taken. Select Preset, Panel Preset, Zone 1 Gain, and the -20 dB preset. Then we can even log a custom message to the event log, like amp channel 1 placed into standby, setting level to -20 dB for future use. Click Next, and finally we see a rule summary for what was just configured. If the value from the amplifier output enable is equal to 0, then execute panel preset -20 dB for zone 1 volume and log amp channel 1 placed into standby, setting level to -20 dB for future use as a medium priority info message. Click on Finish, and our current list has now updated with the new rule. With it selected, the rule summary will be displayed below. Let's verify this works. We'll first open the device panel for our amplifier and locate the amp section where the output enable resides. We see we currently have audio present in the system. Next, let's launch the gain end object where the Zone 1 fader is available. Now remember, a separate custom panel for this Zone 1 fader was created in order to create the panel preset so that the rest of these controls could easily be ignored. Let's turn off the amp output enable, and voila! The fader decreased to -20 dB. We can see that reflected by the input meter on the amplifier, and of course the output meter doesn't reflect anything because the channel is in standby. We can check our event log as well to verify the custom message was logged. Sure enough, it was. Also notice the Logic Rule Wizard notification. This cannot be removed until the amp output enable is not equal to 0. Let's turn it back on, and the fader is still set at -20 dB, and now we can clear the rule by clicking on it. Finally, it should also be mentioned that even though we were using the default panels for testing, as long as the venue file is running on the network, then regardless of how the amp output enable is turned off, the logic rule will be executed. This concludes our overview of logic rules. Be sure to watch the SoundWeb London Configure Logic overview to really see how the two compare and much more. Thanks for watching.